From January to May is usually the dry season here in Trinidad and Tobago, and this morning we'll be chatting a little bit about the impact on water supply and WASA's mitigation plans for that dry season 2025. To do so, let me welcome the Director of Water Management Services at Northeast, Shaira Ali, and Director of Water Management Services Northwest, Kelvin Romain. Good morning to you both and welcome to the Now Morning Show.
Good morning, thank you.
Hi, good morning.
How are we doing this morning?
We're okay.
Yeah?
Good.
Shaira, let me start with you. How has the dry season been impacting water supply at WASA?
Yes, and definitely this year, as in prior years, we have our dry season implementation strategies, and the reservoir levels have been fairly favorable, especially at the east, the Hollis Reservoir. We were able to start the dry season with 100% full capacity.
Nice.
Unfortunately, at Arena, we fell just under full term or full reservoir level. And however, we were, very effective in managing the resource at both reservoirs. We had to make several cutbacks, but still been able to redistribute supply to ensure an equitable distribution for all of our customers in the Northeast area.
Do you have any challenges at this time besides falling a little bit short in the arena? Any other challenges that you had going into the dry season?
Yes, of course. And, every year we do have several challenges. We have a lot of upstream activities. Mm-hmm. Of course, there's a high demand for the water supply along the watercourse. And we have to balance that with the other users, the farmers, for example. We had limited rainfall, unfortunately, below average. We do work very closely with the Met Office and our Water Resources Agency. And they would have predicted just below normal. Fortunately for Hollis, we were just below the predicted rainfall, meaning that in Hollis we were able to capture about 68 millimeter of rainfall out of the projected 89 millimeter. At Arena, it was somewhat a little bit lower, out of what we would have preferred, meaning that we were able to capture 25 millimeter rainfall out of what was projected at 49 millimeters. So we still have been able to manage, and even at Arena, and because it's still such a large percentage of the population, both north and south, we essentially kicked in very early from the onset of the dry season to put off all of our strategies in place.
We'll get back to the strategies in a bit. I want to find out about the Northwest and how we're looking in terms of the supply, in terms of the challenges that you would have faced coming into the dry season.
Sure, thank you. So, like the Northeast, like the Central and South Trinidad, Northwest is heavily dependent on the supply from the Carney Water Treatment Plant. Mm-hmm. And just to add to what Shaira is saying, and to put it in perspective, the capacity of the dam is about 10 billion gallons.
Right.
At this point in time, we have a reservoir level of about 61.29 to be exact. The long-term average is about 75% or thereabout. So there's a deficit. So obviously, we have to be prudent in terms of management. Mm-hmm. I believe we are. There is more or less a sweet spot in terms of our production at this point in time. The production is about 55 million gallons, down from 75 million gallons, that's imperial gallons. And it speaks to a deficit of about 20 million gallons. So we now, as directors, our water management directors, would have to manage that deficit. In Northwest specifically, we are managing a deficit of 8 million gallons. 8 million gallons in the scheme of things mightn't sound large, but
it doesn't. 8 million gallons sound large to me.
In some instances, right? But it is. If you want to compare it to every million gallons of water, you have 10,000
people benefit from that,
affected or benefit accordingly. So we are challenged because of our geography, our topography specifically. Mm-hmm. We have high elevated areas that we distribute to. So between our Carney supply and some of our highly elevated areas, we have about 12 booster stations trying to achieve high elevations. I'll just give you an example, a high elevation like 400 feet, which is equivalent of about 173 PSI. Standard operating mean pressure would be about 150 PSI, so you don't want to over exceed. So it's a balancing act. Additionally, because of the regulated supply, we have to switch on and switch off supply, which adds risk to the equation, meaning that you could get transients, you could get water hammering and cause leaks.
Right.
So you repair the leaks and it could come back. But there are mitigating measures that we take to manage that in terms of regulating the valves properly and such.
One of the things I'm always curious about is how you determine the schedule in terms of this area gets water 1 day per week or 3 days per week. How do we determine which areas get water at what points in time? Is there a reasoning behind the schedule?
Yes, there is not a formula per se, but it's heavily reliant on the demand as well as the supply, based on experience as well. So it's a mix going in there, and it is inevitable to have reduced supply days and supply schedules. So obviously, the least amount of water you use, the more water in your reservoir.
And I just wanted us to touch base a little bit on the deployment of truck-borne water supplies, because I know people who maybe getting limited water supply, and they might say, well, I ain't getting so long and I need to get water, or whatever the case may be, or whether it is the elevated positions or whatever the case may be. What is the situation with truck-borne water supply, Shira?
Yes. So for every dry season, we would normally ramp up our truck-borne services. So same as this year, we would have expanded the fleet to ensure proper coverage in all of the communities, especially the ones that are hard hit during the dry season. So that once the schedule, and this ties into our monitoring, what we were able to do in the authority is digitize a number of our assets on the ground. And not only at the booster stations that Kelvin mentioned, but also on the network itself, the pipeline network. So it gives us that ability to see real-time information, to make decisions very quickly so that we could respond and ensure that we have the continuity of supply. Where we fall short, that information is relayed immediately to our call centers, to our persons, our engineers on the ground, and then we deploy the trucks to those customers who may not have picked up the schedule during that time.
That system is able to detect leaks as well?
We are in the process of upgrading to eventually get to that point.
Okay.
And we have made significant strides in terms of our ability to look at flow and pressures along the network. So that in itself, and Kelvin would have touched on it, in terms of our ability to look at the pressure profile and be able to tell and the flows if there's a leak on the network, especially in the transmission.
So you can tell if the pressure is lower than it's supposed to be, then something clearly wrong in that area.
Definitely.
Okay. That's nice. That's good to know. So we know the work that's going on so that we can tell. Because a lot of people still see leaks and they say, well, why is always leaking on this thing? And I mean, sometimes you might see it fixed and then the same thing happens again a little bit later. And they say, well, why bother to fix it if it's going to mash up again? But of course, the different systems and the different reasonings behind it would cause the leaks to happen again. One of the things that I assume affects water supply is vandalism. If it is that people, we saw the reports recently of people breaking into and stealing things from the WASA pump stations, etc. How does that directly impact on the supply of water to patrons? Kelvin, you want to take this one?
Certainly. Firstly, I would like to say that it's really unfortunate that somebody will actually steal appurtenances associated with water supply. It affects our customers directly because they would obviously be cut off from the system. In the recent past, we have had vandals at our sites, and we would have taken initiatives to ensure that we mitigate against, or in some instances, eliminate the potential risk of having vandals attack us. But, it's really sad to see that people would go, in some instances, people's property and steal these adapters, valves, and stuff like that. I would want to encourage our customers to be vigilant as well. It's a costly exercise as well to replace. So, with that said, I abhor the theft of our appurtenances.
Before we wrap this morning, I just want you guys to talk to the public a bit and give them some advice that we can all do our part in terms of conserving water. What are some of the key points that we should? You just give me like 1 or 2 key points each, if that's all right, that we could work on in terms of our responsibility as the public and how we can conserve water a little bit. Shira?
Definitely. So it's important that everyone partner with WASA and, enact certain simple things in their property, within their property at the business places, ensure all leaking internal plumbing fittings are fully repaired. So, and this even leads to overflowing tanks. We have seen a number of customers where their internal storage system have not been properly functioning. And when the supply is on, the schedule is on, those tanks continue to overflow. And, that prevents the persons higher up in the system to get a proper supply. So, we really want to ask everyone to ensure that your internal plumbing are fully functional, that there are no leaks, and that you conserve wisely in terms of, in instances where watering plants, use the bucket instead of the hose. I know Kelvin would add in a couple more, but these are some of the simple things that we need to do internally so that we ensure, we have supply available for everyone.
Thank you, Cheryl. Kelvin?
Cheryl spelled it out perfectly.
Everything.
Yes. I would just like to add that, it's a collective responsibility, and all stakeholders should play a part, play a role in buffering our capacity by fixing the leaks. We are doing it on our side. I have a little saying, you mitigate, you adapt, and you educate. And we are educating right now. WASA is adapting to situations like this because obviously this is not the first time. We are increasing capacity, using sustainable supplies like well supplies. And we are mitigating in terms of repairing leaks and being proactive with regards to leakage management.
All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us this morning, and thank you for the work that you continue to do, and we continue to look forward to the updates coming on from WASA.
Great.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Kelvin Romain, Director of Water Management Services Northwest, and Shaira Ali, Director of Water Management Services Northeast.